So my privilege this morning to introduce a longtime friend of South Plains College, Dr. Juan Munoz. Dr. Munoz currently serves as the Senior Vice President for Institutional Diversity, Equity, and Community Engagement and Vice Provost for University Education and Student Affairs at Texas Tech University. Many of you know, however, that Dr. Munoz has been named the 6th President of the University of, let me make sure I've got this right, University of Houston downtown. And so he will begin his duties at University of Houston downtown in April of this year. I was visiting with him just a moment ago, and I think his time when he was first announced was 4 months out, and now being just a month out, it's getting really, really hectic, and many, many more people are coming out of the woodwork, wanting to get a little bit of his time and attention and his energy. So, in going on, Dr. Munoz earned his Bachelor's of Arts in Psychology from the University of California, Santa Barbara. Then, after returning from military service in the U.S. Marine Corps during the 1991 Gulf Crisis, he attended California State University, Los Angeles, where he earned his Master of Arts degree in Mexican American Studies. He earned his PhD degree from the University of California, Los Angeles in Curriculum and Instruction. In addition to his work at Texas Tech, Dr. Munoz serves as the Board of Directors of Covenant Health System, Board of the Louise Underwood Hopkins Art Center, Texas Diversity Council, Lubbock Avalanche Journal Editorial Board, board member of Workforce Solutions South Plains, and in 2008 was appointed by the Texas Governor, Rick Perry at the time, to the Board of Directors for the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs, and then reappointed in 2012. He is also a member of the number of civic and volunteer organizations that serve the city of Lubbock and many of the children that are in the city of Lubbock. Dr. Munoz was born and raised in Los Angeles, California, and moved to Lubbock, Texas in 2004. He is happily married for 20 years and is proud father of 3 young boys. As I mentioned before, Dr. Munoz is a long-term friend of South Plains Colleges and is a huge advocate of community college students transferring to Texas Tech University. I'm looking forward to sharing his experiences in eliminating barriers and underrepresented populations for those students. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Juan Munoz.
Thank you for having me. Good morning. So they told me I have about 3 hours to lecture. So I'm gonna keep it down to 2. No, I'm kidding. So, and they got plenty of water here. Is this the mouse for advancing this? Okay, so thanks everyone for having me. I'm gonna try to keep it light, but I'm gonna try to keep it substantive because I appreciate your time. I think what you do is so important. Every time I hear that bio, when I was younger, I would hear these people get introduced. Gail and I were talking about a mutual friend of mine, Commissioner Raymond Paredes, and I would hear people read his bio, and I would just think, man, they're so accomplished, and I haven't done anything. And then I hear some of that stuff read about me, and I just go back to that like kid standing in line waiting for government cheese, and thinking, man, who is that guy? Who is that guy? Now now I dress a little bit better. But I'm not too far removed from standing in line for that. Y'all probably don't know about that government cheese. It's that cheese that doesn't melt in the microwave. You got to put it over strict flame. You got to hit it. You got to put it right there because it just doesn't break down that easy. So, but I appreciate the opportunity to serve in those capacities. And one of the reasons that I think it's somewhat relevant to kind of read those things about myself and others is to give you a sense of where we serve. I learned from, in particular, Commissioner Paredes, that there are many ways to serve. Most people at Texas Tech, they know me from 2004 onward. They're not too familiar with my background. And so I think one of the reasons that Gail, Dr. Malone, invited me is because when I came here the first time, I talked a little bit about that background. And I just think that it's so important as we think about the evolution of opportunity and inclusion that we think about more differently sort of the people that we're dealing with. I went to this program jointly sponsored by Arizona State University and Georgetown University called the Academy for Innovative Leadership in Higher Education. That's what it was called. and we were spoken to by a number of presidents, including Michael Crow, the president of Arizona State, the largest public university in America, who's generally considered to be one of the most dynamic presidents, okay, in the country. And in that context of that academy, we were talking about students. And one of the facilitators said, okay, what student? To one of the cohort members. They said, well, a student. They go, okay, what's the student's name? I said, student. He said, give her a name. Maria. What does Maria do? So my colleague, probably a vice provost like me, said, I don't understand the question. Said, what does Maria do? So somebody else said, she works at Target. Okay, Maria works at Target. And what else? And she's a mother. Maria works at Target, is a mother. How many kids? 2 kids. Husband works. And people started saying different things to flesh out that human being. And it was a real awakening for that group of so-called accomplished administrators to think about in different ways the student, the underserved, right? It made them very human. It made them relatable as they started to think about. As I think about administrating in an innovative way in higher ed, what do the students that I imagine actually look like? What are they called? Give it a name. It was such a revealing sort of exercise for all of us who, when you say generically, students, the underserved community, to really force yourself to say, what does that look like? And so part of what I hope my remarks, and I've got a few slides, and I'm going to sort of extemporize from them, to try to think about when we say sort of Title V, HSI, access, inclusion, completion, like what does that student look like? And not just in Levelland, and not just in Lubbock. Y'all get students from other than Levelland, and we get students at Texas Tech from other than Lubbock. We get students from Wheeler and Pampa and La Mesa. I said La Mesa? No, La Mesa. I go La Mesa? No, La Mesa. I go, y'all pronouncing it incorrectly. It's La Mesa. They go, no. I said, I met this old boy. His name was Joel Longoria. I said, Joel Longoria. That's all the Spanish he knew. Joel Longoria. From La Mesa. All right. So, but we also get students from Houston, from Dallas, from Allen, from Plano, from etc. And so thinking about these students, right? Not just the students that are in our class today, okay? But the students that we hope to be on our campus in a year, in 5 years, in 20 years. And are we creating the circumstances for all of these students to succeed here, there, or elsewhere? The coordinating board has made very clear its expectations. We need more Texans to obtain degrees or credentials and contribute more vigorously to the economy today and the economy that we hope for in the future. And so some of my remarks will pertain to our preparedness, the profile, and then trying to always think about and discussing a little bit about sort of the demographic and profile that I represent, but that many more young people represent more accurately moving forward. So I show this because I like to emphasize the professor part. That's one of the proudest accomplishments of my professional and personal life, becoming a full professor. When you look at why, I'll tell you why it's important. When you look at the breakdown of professors, of faculty, okay, professor, associate, assistant, 85% are of the majority population and male. Something like 1.5% of full professors at research universities in America are Hispanic. So let's just cut that in half, 0.75% male and female. Males are going to outnumber females, so it's probably a little bit to the good of males. But then you break down that aggregate of Hispanic from Mexican Americans, Puerto Ricans, Cubanos, Salvadoreños, and other. you've got something like probably 0.5% Mexican Americans that are full professors. And full professors, tenured professors at research universities have influence. They influence whether or not projects that are amenable to Title V, programs that are supportive of the kids that you transition from here there happen. And it's fewer for Latinas. The number is smaller, right? So most people aren't aware that I taught high school. I was a high school English teacher. I taught the Norton Anthology. I taught What Happens to a Dream Deferred. Does it dry in the sun? No. Like a raisin? Langston Hughes. Fair Verona. Romeo and Juliet. They only listened when I showed DiCaprio's film, Shooting Guns. And then they go, oh, I get it. It's about a girl. Yeah, that's right. I said, mijo, it's always about a girl. Okay? So, but also people aren't aware that I taught at a community college for years. I was an instructor at a community college, and I was also an advisor. And I remember back in the days when Kinko's existed, my students couldn't afford readers. See, at UCLA, we had readers. We'd go, and there'd be a packet of reading assigned by the professors. But our students couldn't afford them. So, I'm not being filmed, am I? Okay, oh yeah. Let's just say packets for my students materialized somehow. And I became more aware of the promise and the desire of these students who, after a full day of labor, would come to these campuses, okay, and try to improve themselves, and try to improve and try to take advantage of their natural intellectual curiosity, and try to create opportunities beyond that community college. The one in particular that I'm thinking of had a service area of 1.8 million. That's the number of students that, or at least the people that lived in the area that particular community college was intended to serve. And they would come after a full days of work, after a full day of LA traffic. Okay, and that's not level land traffic, y'all. Okay, that's like 45 minutes for 9 miles in the heat. And then sit down and have to listen to some person lecture about, what do we really mean when we say it's possible. So, when you look at the demographics, I should have printed out handouts. When you look at the demographics of the country, overwhelmingly, our country is changing. Okay, the number of non-Hispanic whites is going to decrease. The number of Hispanics is going to increase. Number of African Americans is going to change or remain the same proportionately, and Asians are going to also increase. What does this affirm? What we all know is that our campuses and our classrooms in our country is becoming more diverse. Okay? It's interesting. I was at a program many years ago, and former cabinet member Henry Cisneros, and the name escapes me of the Latino who's in charge of AT&T Mobile. He's Cuban. And they were on a panel, and they talked about capturing the strategic advantage of diversity. I said, what? I go, what? Capturing the strategic advantage of diversity. Corporate leaders. What? That's different from, what are we going to do with all of them? How are we going to educate them? It's a whole different, I remember sitting up in my seat going, what? The strategic advantage? What? It was astounding. They saw diversity only in a promising context. Okay? They weren't deterred by the kinds of challenges and obstacles and obstructions. They were animated. Like the word educator, educar, to draw out, to bring forth. They were excited about the possibility. Oh, let me go. When you look, all you got to see is the colors. When you look at the transition of the country, you see which are the populations of growth and which are the populations that will decrease. The country will become more diverse. Our challenge, our mission, our expectation is the preparedness of this population. The same hope and promise that our parents had when they were growing up in this country or coming to this country, all of the possibilities to ensure that this group here enjoys the same opportunities that they did in the past. And I, for one, am optimistic. You know, we had a chancellor named Kent Hans. And Kent Hans said, y'all, if you're down on young people, y'all haven't talked to enough young people. I like that. You talk to young people, they're optimistic. They see what's possible. They're excited. Young people aren't jaded. If you think they are, maybe you need to talk to more young people. You talk to these little kids in middle school and early high school. I say early high school. You know, sophomore, junior year can be a little tough. And they're excited. My son, on the way home, to drive him to school this morning, he says, Dad, I want to go to a STEM middle school. And I said, I never even heard of a STEM middle school. He goes, well, neither have I, but I'm sure one exists. Because we're moving to Houston. He goes, and Houston's big. I'm like, all right, we'll find one. I don't know. You know, maybe I'll just write on a card. Look at me. It says right there, STEM middle school. I don't know, right? So when we talk about the growth and demographic change, okay, you know, and then we say, how many undergraduate students are enrolled in community colleges? And so some of these metrics you know about, okay? Over 10 million are in two-year schools. In 2013, there are 700 two-year degree granting institutions in the United States compared to, there are 1,700 compared to about 3,000 four-year schools. In 2015, nearly 6.3 million students were enrolled in public two-year schools. The point being, okay, and in the next slide, when you look at the demographics of the people enrolled, not just at South Plains College, Howard College, Midland College, where I stole Ryan from, Amarillo College, I already said that, or Odessa College, okay? But across the country, this is becoming increasingly the portal. If you look at data about students of color in the 60s and 70s and beginning to taper off in the early 80s and then certainly changing in the mid 80s, students of color, okay, the reason they're called underrepresented is because they were in higher education at a proportionate rate less than that which they represented in the population. Get it? So the few that were able to matriculate into higher ed matriculated into four-year schools immediately. The mission of two-year schools in the largest systems, like in California and Texas, originally had a very different mission. Vocational, preparedness, etc., and to a lesser extent to prepare for matriculation of four-year schools originally. So when you looked at students of color in the 60s and certainly the 50s, 60s, 70s, and the beginnings of the 80s, they started in four-year schools. But as four-year comprehensive and elite liberal arts schools became more prohibitively expensive, these populations that have historically been middle to lower income population groups, demographics, began to see the utility, okay, and the efficiency of community colleges. So now you've seen this inversion where larger numbers of people, particularly Hispanics, are beginning their education in institutions like South Plains College. They can begin their education, and if we're not careful, it might end. Now many come here, right, with the goal of a certificate or a workforce credential. Bravo. They have clarity of purpose. Excellent, right? Some people make the argument that, that everybody should go to college. I know too many people who you put them in a classroom and somebody talking to them for 2 hours. That's not going to be a good outcome. Okay, they want to be they're comfortable outside. They feel fulfilled and satisfied working in other occupations. But the issue of being college capable, college ready, and giving them the choice to say a career, a vocation, or a degree, you have the choice for either. And you're prepared to succeed in either. And you put the onus on the student to decide their course of action. We don't decide it for them by manipulating the curricular tracks that they'll be a part of. Because this is going to happen. And what I believe will happen is more students will begin to come into community colleges. We already see the coordinating board has already approved baccalaureate degrees. Why? Because four-year schools are not currently meeting the demand. There are particular industries that we need more graduates of. The pre-nursing programs that start at community college. I mean, you look at every nursing program in the state and it's impacted. I tell every Latino male, mijo, be a nurse. Mijo, be a nurse, you'll never be unemployed. Be a nurse, mijo. Okay? So you're going to see more of that happening and more students beginning their education here. And the fingerprints of what you do will be on those students. What percentage of low-income minority and first-time in-college students attend community colleges? When we start looking, we see, clary and clear, that lower-income students of all backgrounds begin at the more accessible and affordable community college. What an extraordinary mission. What an extraordinary purpose you serve. To give those of modest means the opportunity to pursue their intellectual curiosity to its end. Okay. There are kids that might want to go to $50,000 a year schools, but can't. And without the mission of South Plains College, Midland College, Odessa College, Amarillo College, Houston Community College, these are in fact dreams deferred. But there's also a high correlation between poverty and ethnicity. And so many low-income students from low-income families begin their education here. Okay. This is important as we think about Title IX, service, structure, pedagogy. We talk about preparedness, high school preparedness. And it's not simply, as the coaches say, it's not the X's and O's. You got to get the Jimmies and the Joes. I know many well-intentioned teachers who are abysmal pedagogists. They say, I've been doing this a long time, so here's the content. If you get it, great. If you don't get it, that's on you. Pedagogy is an art. The presentation, the sequencing, the questioning, the provocation of imagination. How do you bring out from that kid something that they don't want to surrender? I know so many kids, so many Chicanos, they sit in the back of the room. When I go to a restaurant, I still sit in the back of the room. I want my back to the wall so I could see it coming. Whatever comes through that door, okay. For all the Mexicanos, look at a couple of you laughed. You ever get that? Okay, you know that word, ponte trucha, right? You know that word, trucha? You want to translate? See it coming. Be aware. A lot of these kids come from circumstances. Okay? This is all foreign. This is terrifying. Maybe their parents were educated. Maybe they weren't. Maybe their parents speak English. Maybe they don't. I said to somebody who was asking me about, how do your parents feel about you being a university president? I go, my parents don't understand the term. What? She doesn't understand what it means. What do you mean? She was born in a barn and never went to school. And they think I'm joking. She was born in a barn in La Estancia, Mexico, Zacatecas, by a midwife, probably with animals in close proximity, and never went to school. So I say, Ama, voy a ser presidente. I'm going to be, and she goes, okay. For years, she would just say, he works at a school. ¿Qué hace tu hijo? Allá trabaja en una escuela. He works over there in some school. Okay? She's not an ignorant person, right? She just doesn't have context. Our students sometimes are going to come to these campuses and not have context. It doesn't make them unintelligent. But if I've never had anyone ever go to college, ever speak to somebody in financial aid, ever fill out a scholarship form, a FAFSA form, okay? I remember telling this story. I don't tell it too much anymore, but since my dad passed away, he didn't like it when I told it. I was sitting there. My father used to smoke and drink black coffee. 1 spoon of sugar. That's it. You put 1.5, he would return it. And he was right there, and he goes, ¿Qué haces? What are you doing? I go, I'm filling out this form for college. He went like that, like, muy criado. Like, oh, big shot. All right. So I'm filling out this form, and he says, and I said, Dad, in Spanish, I go, it says occupation. He goes, in Spanish, he goes, what's that? ¿Qué es eso? I go, well, what do you do for a living? For effect, drama. He goes, soy un setup man. I go, what? He goes, setup man. What? Setup man. Okay, I asked him 4 times, right? I go, I don't know what in Spanish, I go, no te entiendo. I don't understand. He goes, in Spanish, he goes, soy el man que va a la máquina y lo set up. Does that sound familiar? So I could tell he was getting mad, and he was getting to the end of his cigarette, right? So I didn't want to ask too many more questions, right? So I thought, I can't write like S-E-T. You're laughing. I know, right? So I'm at the cocina, right? I could tell he's getting mad. So I go, al cabo, no, it's not like I'm going to get in. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. So I wrote set, capital S. Want to be respectful. Up, man. You're laughing, right? I put it. I figured this is going to go to some stranger. I don't know them. I don't care what they think. But if I ask this man one more question, I care what he thinks. Okay. I applied to one school. Fortunately, I got into one school. It's a good school. I probably couldn't get in today. It's a much better school today. And I remember that whole exercise, like, and I think about these kids today. Now it's all online, right? They do it on their phone. They fill out their FAFSA on the phone. And yet that same sort of apprehension and trepidation, and how do I do it? Am I negotiating it correctly? I didn't know the answer, so I looked at the old guy in the room. He didn't know the answer either. That's my point. Our kids may not have somebody that knows the answer. This doesn't make them ignorant, and it doesn't make them uninspired. It makes them unaware. And we shouldn't translate naivety with stupidity. Nobody comes here, writes their name on the loan, takes the money, drives the highway because they're not committed to being here at Tech, at LCU, at Wayland Baptist. How do we cultivate? Right? That inherent desire to improve my life and the life of my family through education, which remains, in my opinion, the single greatest mechanism for social mobility, social improvement, and personal satisfaction. Later on, when I was in college, some lady named Lucy Castaruda called me. I've been called to the office a lot when I was young, so I knew how this was going. So they said, oh, son, Lucy's calling, she wants you to go to her office. Usually when somebody was calling me to their office, their name was like Sister Stella Marie or Sister Marguerite, or somebody, Father Murphy was calling me to the office. So I knew the routine when I got called, right? So I go over there, and there was like 3 of them. And I thought, man, I've only been in this college like a week or something. I haven't done anything bad enough for 3 people to be in the room to interrogate me. I just got here. So they go, are you Juan Munoz? And So back then I was a little bit bigger than I am now, and so I bowed up, because, I'm from the neighborhood and they called my name, so I can't look soft. So I bowed up and, I gave him a hard look. I said, yeah. Who wants to know? Right? Because back in the neighborhood, they would say, they called my name Munoz. Hey, Munoz, you had to turn around and get ready for something coming your way. That's the way it was in the neighborhood. So I thought, I'm still in the neighborhood. So these people, they go, we have a question about your application. I go, Sas, man. Something, what did I do wrong? They go, and as soon as they started, they go, under occupation. I go, oh, man. Oh, man, I knew it, right? I knew it. They're going to kick me out because of what I wrote. That's what I was thinking. They're going to kick me out because of what I wrote. And they go, what is this setup, man? And they go, is your father like a hitman or something? So I told them the whole story, like I told you all, and they laughed and I left, right? Here's what I found out. When I went to my dad's work one day, he was a factory guy, worked in it was called American Springs Company, California Spring. And he'd never been formally educated. So he was basically, he worked with machinists. And he would go and set the tolerances on the machine that would produce these springs. Big springs, little springs. So he was the guy that would go there, set it up, and then the machinist would come and produce the item. So they would yell at him, Javi, go set it up. For 20 years, right? That's what he thought was my job, my occupation was as a setup man, right? So a lot of us coming from these surrounding areas, Lubbock, Tampa, Tahoka, La Mesa, our families had to work, and so there's limited education. And what these data tell us is that there's a likelihood that more of our kids, of all backgrounds, of all ethnic backgrounds, okay, including low-income Anglo boys and girls. I've met poor Anglo boys and girls at Texas Tech, and I met one, and I remember I tell this story. I said, where are you from, young lady? And she goes, I'm from Earth. I hadn't been in Lubbock long, and I go, okay, I'm from the earth too, but where on the earth? And she wasn't laughing. She goes, no, I'm from Earth, up the highway. What? And then somebody goes, there's a town called Earth. Now, I'd already heard about Happy Texas, right? I hadn't heard about Earth, okay? And so the point being, from that small town, that's different. Being from Earth, Texas, Happy Texas, La Mesa, Texas, different from being from Houston, Texas. And so how do we see these students differently? 81% of entering community college students indicate that they want to earn a degree. When we talk about higher education and look at very good schools, their retention rate, as reported by iPads, a good retention rate is 80% and above. 80% and above is a good retention rate. Okay? Texas Tech, we're about 84%. What happens to 20%? What happens to 16% in 1 year? That's a lot of loss. Kids start school here and there with the expectation to finish, and yet we lose. And we're talking about 50% graduation rates, 40% graduation rates. What's the completion rate here? I'm not going to bring it up, okay? Of AA and AS degrees. Now, many of your students leave before they ever finish, and if you don't have a reverse credit agreement, you don't ever hear about the student completing their courses somewhere else. But my point is, people begin higher ed with the hope and expectation and goal to finish. And that's important, that your initial motivation is to finish. How do we look at what's preventing it? In our campus, we have some courses that create bottlenecks. In our campus, we have some courses that are taught by graduate students and adjuncts that maybe should be taught by full-time instructors. At our school, we have sometimes students that don't come back because they get a parking ticket, then they get a boot on their car, and then that becomes a bit bigger ticket. So we lose a student over a $40 ticket. We've got to look at what are the obstacles to serving the underserved and being much more thoughtful We created a program with Yancey and South Plains College a few years ago called TAP. These are students that are denied admission to Texas Tech. They're denied admission. You are not admissible. And we created a partnership where instructors from here go there, teach on our campus. We have 140 kids this fall. We have about 400 kids currently at Texas Tech that we said are not admissible. They are at Texas Tech, fully articulated students with IDs in good standing that we said were not admissible. And because of South Plains College, they are there. They are graduating. We have had TAP students graduate. Because students that come into higher ed do so with the very high expectation of completing. Okay. And community colleges in Texas are important. They provide access. 50 community college districts in Texas. Okay. 47% enrolled in higher ed. And the trends that we're seeing, like the coordinating board expectation that I'm talking about, the 60 by 30, community colleges are going to be integral, not marginal, not peripheral, not topical, but integral. We cannot educate 60% of Texans aged 25 to, I think it's 37, without community colleges being involved to achieve a degree or a credential or a workforce credential of some kind. And a big part of that 60% are going to be Hispanic and low-income students, African American and low-income students of any background. And so, when we talk about, what I talk about, sort of removing barriers, I make these points. Okay. There has to be an understanding of the past and a clear vision of the future. Where are you going? I'm astounded when I come across people that talk about higher ed and we're going to do this and we're going to do that and finance. And I go, what's your goal? What do you hope to do? What do you mean? What do you... If Title V here, if part of the SPC's mission is to significantly improve the educational outcomes, okay, of Hispanics, then what is it now and what do you want it to be? And by when? And what resources and what personnel and what marketing and what messaging and what branding are you going to muster and marshal in the service of that goal? And if your answer is, I'm not sure what you're talking about, then don't expect it to change. People are inspired by inspired and ambitious goals. Somebody said to me, there's only one way, you can't, you only coast downhill. There's no coasting uphill. Mediocrity, lack of initiative, lack of vision, lack of clarity, hard to make change. You have to have clarity of vision, discipline, and leadership. Faculty are leaders. Presidents are leaders. Ryan Gibbs are leaders. Yancey's, department chairs. You have to have an understanding of your situation. I don't think it's relevant to talk about how Houston Community Colleges, it might be getting it done in Levelland, Texas. Okay. But sometimes we can become complacent. I've been here 20 years, I know everything. I've been here since they built the student union, I know everything. My mama came here, my daddy came here, my brother came here, I met my husband here, I met my wife here, I know everything. Do you? When was the last time you sat down and ate with some kids that come to school here? When was the last time you sat down with the student and said, what does your mother and father do? When was the last time you asked them, how's it going in your life? Yesterday I taught a class and I brought a friend in named Jorge Carino. He works for Lita and John down in Lubbock, and he lectured to my class. And when we were driving back, he said, I appreciate what you did. At the beginning of every class I said, have you done something? What did you do this weekend? Did you do anything? Some young man said, well, my Rottweiler had puppies. I said, did they? I go, did they all survive? He goes, no, 2 passed. Right? I go, maybe for all of you that's not important. Maybe in his house that's important. But have you asked? I'm just saying, sometimes we can become complacent. I find myself doing that all the time. I keep talking about, well, when I went to college, it was 1985, 81, 80s. A long time ago. They didn't have smartphones. Nobody was talking about Google, right? They didn't have any of this stuff going on when we were going to school. But how often do we really disrupt our sense of comfort and familiarity? Because we've been here for a couple of days. This is a real challenge for educators because we become so comfortable with our inherent expertise and familiarity, it's difficult to disrupt ourselves and say, let me go to somebody else's class. Let me sit down and eat with some of these kids. If you're a faculty member, have you ever had lunch with maybe the custodial staff? Have you ever gone to where they go every morning to check in? I'm just saying, we expect students to come here and comport themselves and adapt. What do we do to adapt? Most of us don't do enough. Don't do enough. I remember one time I think it was a tech club or something like that, and they spilled something, and I took my jacket off and I got down on my knees. I thought they were going to have a stroke. I started scooping it up. I didn't want somebody to fall, right in front of me, slip a disc or something. These guys, oh my, how could, no, we got it. I like, what, you think I'm above cleaning up? I was mopping my garage yesterday. My wife is like, here's the mop. Well, but their whole idea is like, you sort of do something different than what I do. How many times do we disrupt what we do? You have to have contextual authority and authenticity, because if these kids don't believe that you really care, you can't fool them. You might think you fool them. You might think you fool them, but they're not fooled. These kids are smart. They're resourceful. They're strong. Do we have authenticity? Okay? Or do they think when they're looking at you, you're just going through the motions? I remember this woman, I forgot her name, but her first name was Linda. And the reason I remembered Linda in financial aid, because I could remember Linda. Because my mom had a comadre named Miss La Señora Linda. Ama te llama La Señora Linda. So when this lady introduced herself to me in financial aid at UC Santa Barbara named Linda, I thought, oh, I wonder if she's related to La Señora. She wasn't. And I was going to have to leave school. And that's what I was doing there, like signing the withdrawal papers. And so she comes up to me and she says, so she says, why are you doing this? She didn't know me from Adam. When I went to UC Santa Barbara in the 80s, it was like 4% combined minority. 4% combined. Okay. My friend Baltazar went with me. He'd never graduated. He had real dark black hair, dark. Mexican American, but like dark Indian. I could see him. I could see him like 3 miles away. I could see him down in like Ropesville. Hey, Balta. He changed his name from Baltasar. He changed his name to Robert. Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did. I tell him that right now. Oh, hey, Robert. Okay. And so I'm signing that thing with her, and she's like, "Why?" I go, "I can't afford it." Well, she goes, "Can't you talk to your parents?" They don't speak English. And my father's particularly didn't speak anything if it had to do with me taking his money. Okay. And she's like, "You know what? Before you sign that," she said, "Are you going to borrow money are you going to like want a car someday?" I go, "Yeah, I want a car someday." Yeah. She goes, "Like a nice car or a mess?" I go, "Well, yeah. Like everybody, I think at least a Honda. At least." Oh, okay. Are you going to buy a house one day or inherit one? I go, "Inherit?" I go, who are you talking to? I go, "No, I want a house." She said, "You're going to have to borrow some money?" I go, "Well, yeah, I guess if they lend it to me, I'll borrow it. Maybe across the street from where my parents live. I don't know. It can't be too far from my mom, I'm Mexican, That extension, that umbilical nomás, it only goes so far, You got to be close. It's like this, "Ama, where are you going?" And And so the lady's like, so you're going to borrow money for car? Yeah, well, I mean, I guess I don't have any. I'm here because I've got to withdraw because I have no money. So obviously, I'm going to have to borrow for everything, right? And she's like, and you're going to borrow money for a house one day, but you aren't going to borrow some money to finish your education in order to have those things in the future? She changed the course of my life. This stranger who took a minute to ask me 2 questions. Now, it indeed changed the course of my life, because once I realized I could borrow money, I kept doing it over and over and over. When I graduated, I sent her some flowers. You know, they weren't real nice flowers. I still was, you know, mostly spending the money on me and stuff, but, you know, I wanted to do something for her. The point is, like, I didn't even know how to rescue myself. And if it was somebody with authenticity, because if she had said, you know, if she had said something like this, here's the paper. Or if she had said something like, oh, I understand, it happens a lot, here's the paper. If she had said anything else, I would have gone back home where my girlfriend was and go work at Angelus Furniture or UPS like all my homeboys. Hey, Charlie, you got a job at UPS? Come on. Órale, vámonos, let's go. That's the way it was. You worked at Angelus Furniture, or if you had a little bit more ambition, UPS. That was good living, right? But this lady, and if she had looked at me the wrong way, made me feel like less of a man, okay, because I was a man. I mean, I was a boy, but I thought I was a man, okay? But she helped me preserve my self-respect, and she changed the course of my life. You have to have goals with outcomes and accountability, because if you say we want to do this for this kid, okay, and so on, when everybody's in charge, no one's responsible. You've got to have a person and a goal, and you've got to say, where are we? The school that I'm going to is a school that receives a huge number, a sizable number, okay, of transfer students from Lone Star and Houston Community and others. Okay, we've got to get this right. And when they say, well, who's accountable? Okay, I'm going to say at least one guy and others, and here are our goals, and we're going to move the needle. We're going to move the needle. We're going to make a commitment to these students and their families and this state and this country, and we're going to move the needle, and we're going to make progress, and we're not going to accept mediocrity, and we're not going to become complacent because we can't afford it, and these kids have already told us, 81%, that they want to finish. So we're going to find a way, the way you've been finding a way. But now you've got to think about new ways, because it's a different population of kids coming. And what's working? When you affirm these things from the high, the president, the provost, you got to have a critical mass of kids. And you have to have a critical mass of change agents. Because if it's just you in the room, always saying the same thing, it's going to be hard. You've got to have recognition for the things that you do. We don't do this well enough in higher ed. We say, hey, we want you to remove barriers, but don't do it on our time. Don't you do it on our time. Hey, we want you to go talk to these families, but hey, come to this committee meeting first. You've got to set priorities. You can't say everything's important, because if everything's important, nothing is. You've got to be proactive. You've got to shape opportunity. You know, we know that when students are working with faculty, when students work in an office, I saw some student out here at the desk of the bookstore, they stay here. They're more successful. They learn skills. They learn soft skills. They learn how to talk to people. They know how to present themselves. My son, my 11-year-old son, is picture day, right? It says picture day. So his collar is stuck inside like he has no collar. And he says, and I say, I'll clean it up for this audience. I say, son, extract your collar. That's not what I said. And he goes, and he says, nobody will notice. I go, it's picture day. We'll notice for the next 30 years that your collar was stuck inside. And then I just, I went off. And there's a way to be, mijo. There's a way to be. If you want respect, respect yourself and how you present yourself to the world. All right? These things that students are doing, working at the bookstore, taking your money, speaking to you, it teaches them skills that are so valuable when they transfer to Tech or Lamar or UT or A&M or Houston. We have to understand the cultural and personal satisfaction for a student. What motivates you? We talked about that student, Maria, working at Target with 2 kids. Why are you here? I want to receive a bachelor's degree so that my children know that their mother's college educated. Okay, let's go. Okay. For some, it's professional mobility. For some, it's personal satisfaction. I went to UCLA. You might have heard about it. We had women in our PhD program. It was for their own personal satisfaction. They weren't interested in being university faculty. They weren't interested in being deans or presidents or provosts. What they wanted to do was study because their minds were animated and curious. What an amazing thing to be able to just explore things that you find. What's your motivation? Okay? Not all faculty, not all staff, not all employees of South Plains College are inclusive agents. Not all. I'm reading this book called Burro Genius. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, by Victor Villaseñor. Okay? Reign of Gold, he wrote. It's called Burro Genius. And the first couple of 20 pages, he talks about being invited. He had just written this book called Macho. That was his first book, Macho. Perfect. Okay? A good book. I read it. It's okay. And so he gets invited by the California Association of English Teachers. And the keynote doesn't show up. So the publicist says, any of you writers can be the keynote. He has jeans, a big buckle. He grew up on a ranch in Oceanside. He looks absolutely unlike the quintessential intellectual writer. So he goes, I'll do it. So they had no choice. He gets up to the mic, like 1,000 people in a ballroom, gets intimidated, and then finally he says, he proceeds to tell the English teachers something, I'm paraphrasing, something to the effect of, I wish I could kill all of you. Because when I was in school, you murdered me. You murdered me with your punctuation, with your capitalization. You murdered, I was dying and I hated school. So he's crying and he's yelling at all these teachers, and they're poor innocent teachers, like, you weren't in my class, right? And so it gets better after that. But the point I'm making is, as faculty, as staff, we don't realize when we might be the instrument of somebody's destruction. Like in the case of Linda, the instrument of my salvation. An anonymous kid who presented himself, and she exercised the smallest amount of kindness. Maria Strong's husband, Eric, says, never underestimate the power of a little encouragement. Avoiding the conditioning effect of apathy. Hey, this is what I do. I've been doing it for years. Apathy is not excellence. Okay. And at Tech, we've tried to do some of these things, and we've gotten some awards. And these are just a few. And even the Mentor Tech program and Upward Bound programs that we have more Upward Bound Title V programs at Texas Tech than ever in its history. And we have the SSS grant, the UBMS grant. We're submitting an application for a Upward Bound Veterans grant, and the resubmitting for the McNair, which we had for about 20 years, and then lost it. All of these sort of environmental conditions improve our eligibility and likelihood of receiving these grants and serving these students. The grant is in the service of students. The students like Maria, the students like Juan, the students like Yancy, the students like Ryan, that come from these outlying neighborhoods, that want an education, that come from Wheeler, that come from Menard, that come from Pampa, that come from O'Donnell, home of Dan Blocker from Bonanza. I've been told that a couple times. And I like this quote from Sagan. Many of the problems facing us, if we say, how do we improve inclusiveness? Okay, that's input. How do you improve the climate? Through a reduction of apathy, through clarity, affirmation, reward, policy, support, kindness. And then the throughput, so that when they leave here and go on as professionals, starting their own businesses, or continuing their education, they look back at the Gales and they say, that person changed the course of my life. Because the consequences of our apathy, okay, the consequences of our apathy are incalculable. Every kid matters. Every family matters. And sometimes they don't know how to be agents for themselves of opportunity. My son, I was driving here, he's in Midland for a baseball tournament, he's 18. I told you I only applied to one school. It was a fellow by the name of David Boyer, not Hispanic, and said in college we went to UC Santa Barbara, and it was in the 60s, and he said there was all kinds of protest and mayhem. I said, you get to do protest and mayhem in college? All right, so that's where I applied, so my choice was the one place or Angela's Furniture or UPS. UPS being preferable because it came with benefits and you're a Teamster. You get a cool jacket, right? My son has applied to 12 schools. He's been accepted at a lot of schools, including one of the Federal Military Academy. And he's vexed. Oh, I don't know what to do. So part of me wants to tell him, here's what you're going to do. Right? That doesn't work out, though. And he's telling me about this and that and all that. But if you go here, mijo, you can potentially work with a faculty member. You can work in a lab. There might be an internship. We could prepare your dossier for a Fulbright, for a Udolph, for a Goldwater. I said, mijo, hell, we might be able to prepare you for a Rhodes Scholar. Okay, that was Diego's conversation with his dad. Here was mine. Apa, ¿cómo se set up, man? ¿Cómo? How's that? Set up, man. Okay, see what I'm saying? Many of the problems facing us may be soluble, but only if we are willing to embrace brilliant, daring, and complex solutions. Okay. When we talk about inclusiveness, access, service, excellence, for 2017, not for 97, not for 87, not for 67, but today. And not just preparing your students for Levelland, Ropesville, Brownfield, but for Buenos Aires, for Mexico City, for London, for Prague, for New York, for Chicago. You never know. But if you don't inculcate brilliant and daring aspirations, because they're coming here, 81% saying, I want to finish. And if we don't inculcate these kinds of ambitious qualities, you might alter the course of their life in a way that you never intended. Because such solutions require brilliant and daring and complex people. And that's who you are. And that's who you are. Okay. I've taught at a community college. I've been an academic advisor. I've sat down and looked at the articulation agreements and say, you can't take that, you can't take that, and unfortunately, you should have never taken that. I've sat down there and seen the dejected look. You mean I've got another year? And possibly part of a summer. I've seen it. But it takes daring, complex, brilliant people to say, but here's what's necessary to get you to where you want to be. And we're not going to give up because we know you're not going to give up. Because people didn't give up on us. People like Linda, people like David Boyer, and people like Raymond Paredes. I met Raymond. You're going to get a pattern like this guy was always broke. I was at UCLA. It was my first semester, and there's a thing called Brew and Walk. My advisor, Peter McLaren, a Canadian, not Hispanic, said, hey, you know that guy over there, Raymond Paredes? I go, no. And he goes, you want to meet him? I go, no. Why should I? Maybe he wants to meet me. I was poor, so I had to compensate with arrogance. And he goes, well, let me take you over there. And he was eating a burrito, like a Taco Bell, right? Like not the nice one. He was like, you know, he got like a cheap dollar burrito or something. And he goes, and he's eating, and he goes, hey, Raymond, this is, you know, Juan, and this is that. And he goes, so he you know, he slow played me, right? He kind of slow played me a little bit to draw out the drama. Takes a big bite. How you doing? I go, that's all right. He goes, you doing okay? I go, yeah, it's all right. And he goes, I said, but I'm going to have to leave here after this semester. He goes, so he takes a bite just for effect, you know, just to string it out. He goes, why? I said, because UCLA didn't give me any money and I'm poor. He goes, takes another bite. By then I was getting kind of like annoyed because I knew he could have just kept talking, right? He wasn't that hungry. And he goes, well, if you want a job, come by my office. And I said, my people are Mexicanos, okay? I don't know anything else but to work. All right, so he walked away. So the next day I was like this. Hey, you said something about a jale? So I worked in his office for 7 years. Right? A little window of opportunity. Right. Change the course of your life. Change the 6th president of the University of Houston downtown, where the D makes all the difference. I'm working on that. You like that? Yeah, you like it? Yeah. Where the D is for determination. Anyways, I'm working on a few. Because this guy was willing to interrupt his mastication, right, and offer me a job. And I worked hard for it. I earned it. He got a lot of labor out of me, okay? And I learned how to be brilliant. Well, not so brilliant, but I certainly learned how to be daring and complex because of him, okay? And he'll tell you the same thing about people in the course of his education. His English teacher in El Paso, who expected so much from him. His professor at the University of Texas named Americo Paredes, no relation, who's told him, I've been waiting for a student like you my whole career. Or his service in Vietnam, or my service in the Marine Corps. These things that come together because of people just like you that wouldn't accept, wouldn't become complacent, and wouldn't become apathetic when that student presented themselves and you were there to serve. And it changed the course of their life. And if we do that for enough students, we'll change the course of our community, our state, and our country. Okay? There's never a good time to stop serving the underserved until we no longer call them the underserved. What you're doing is changing lives. What you're doing is changing futures. And so for someone in comprehensive university in the state of Texas, you know, we're so appreciative. My friend who was also on my committee named Danny Solorzano used to say, if we see a little further, it's because we stand on the shoulders of giants. Okay? I've gotten to see a little further because of giant shoulders like the ones in this room. Okay? Thanks, y'all. Have a great program.